will be doing a presentation on God's crooked lines and mental illness stigma. So basically, the main character is the woman in the middle. Her name is Alice. And so Alice is a detective. And so Alice is hired by Garcia del Olmo to investigate his son's murder because he believes that his son was murdered in the mental asylum in which he was living at, even though the asylum had written the death off as a suicide. But the father does not believe that it was a suicide. And so, as a private detective, she is very smart, very talented, very cunning with her words. And so Alice devises this plan to be admitted into the psych ward. So while she goes to the psych ward, and Del Olmo takes her there, and he tells her the plan. He gives her all the written out and signed paperwork, and then she tricked her husband into signing documents so that she would be admitted. And so the documents state that basically she was trying to poison her husband and is an excellent liar, and that's listed in her case. And so basically, fast forward, she is admitted into the hospital, and immediately she is like stripped down and hosed. Like, this movie was extremely interesting, but it was also very like shocking, just because the movie takes place in the 70s. And so I'm sure that it's done up for film, but I don't really feel like it's being done up that much. Like, this woman, as soon as she was admitted to the hospital, was not treated like a person anymore. She was stripped down, she was hosed down, and then they did like an in-depth body like cavity search. And then after that, she was sent to her room, and that is when she meets the person all the way to the right. That is her friend throughout the movie, and he tries to help her sort of crack this case, right? And so what he does is he has a fear of water. And so whenever he sees water or touches water, he has a seizure while touching the water. His name is Ignacio, and so Ignacio does his best to help Alice and watch over Alice, because there are many other people in the asylum that are more severely impaired. Um, and so the film really portrays how these people are being treated, and it's like the more severe patients, or whenever there's a punishment, they get sent to the cage. And so the cage is basically the basement of the asylum, where they are literally in cages and they don't have any pants on, they just have on white gowns, and they are electrocuted, electroshock therapy. So that was very horrific to watch because it was very realistic. Like, it really took me aback. And so the person in the middle is Dr. Monty Castell. And so she believes Alice. I'm sorry, let me backtrack. So Alice starts getting scared that she's being electrocuted and shocked and taking sedatives, and that they're shooting, like injecting stuff into her. And so she's like losing track of days. And so this was just supposed to be a 3-day thing, and now it's turning into weeks. And the weeks are just passing by, and her brain is in such a diluted state that she feels that she is slipping into the psychosis and delusions that she lied about having in order to get into the asylum. And so Dr. Castell in the middle, Alice starts telling Dr. Castell, like, hey, I'm not actually, I don't have mental illness. I'm here, I'm a detective. And so Castell believes her and tries to help her to break out of the asylum and starts believing her claims, as well as Dr. Aureliano on the left. Dr. Aureliano also believes Alice, that she's telling the truth, and that the warden of the asylum is in cahoots with Alice's husband, because as it turns out, Alice's husband was actually just interested in Alice for her money and wanted to send her to the psych ward so that he would have power of attorney over all of her belongings. And basically, what they found out was that he wiped Alice clean of all her money and fled to Southeast Asia, I think that's what they said. And so, as you can see in this picture, Alice is super distraught. She's in the cage. And during this part of the movie, this is when she fully slips into the psychosis, and you start seeing everything in almost like three-dimensional. It was very scary, if I'm being honest. And then to the right are there these twins. They're called Remulus and Romulus. And so Romulus is very active and he talks a lot, and he believes that Alice is his mother, because the two of them do not know who their mother is. And so he also tries to protect Alice from, the more violent people in the asylum, and tries to help Alice break free. Um, Even though he believes that Alice is his mother. So because he believes Alice is his mother, he is very protective over her. And so just in this scene of the movie, it was very dark for me. And it just really highlights how scary I feel like mental illness can be, especially when you're slipping in and out of psychosis and you're being medicated for things that you don't actually have. It can make you feel like you're crazy. And so towards the end of the movie, Alice is finally released from the asylum, and she's released from the asylum because um, she there was a murder in the asylum, and she was able to piece together who committed the murder, and said that the Elephant Man committed the murder. He was this giant man, and said, "Look at the Elephant Man's hands," because she believed that he stabbed someone with a piece of glass. And so she said that if he was the one that committed this crime, he will have all cuts all over his hands because it's glass. And she turned out to be right. And so then the movie then ends with her being in sort of like a court to get released from the asylum. And the warden steps down from his position and tries to persuade the other doctors into saying, like, hey, you're going to pick a mental patient over me. You're going to listen to a mental patient over me. I've been your boss for X amount of years, blah, blah, blah. And sort of tries to push them to not go against him. Um, but in the end, they all ended up going against him, and Alice is released from the asylum. Um, it was honestly a really terrific movie. You really should watch it. It's on Netflix. It's fantastic. It's quite long. It's about 2 hours and 45 minutes, so it's quite a long movie. But it's a fantastic film. And so what I liked about it is that it really highlighted how far we have come in the field of mental health, and how well, how just like you could be thrown in the asylum for any sort of reason. Your husband can just say that you're crazy, and then you can end up there for forever. Like, I think that that is so insane. And so I it also really hit home for me because I do have a mental illness that I, deal with on a day-to-day basis. I take medications for, and I've been doing pretty well for the past couple weeks, but there are times like in the fall semester where I was just struggling really bad because they were changing my medications, and I just felt like so out of control that I wasn't even in control of my own self. And so it was a pretty scary feeling. And so watching this movie, it really struck me like, if I was born a couple decades earlier, because I was born in 1997, so let's say I was born in 1967, like, would I have been placed in one of these asylums for like quote craziness? So it's something that really hit home for me and that I thought about. Overall, relating this to cross cultural psychology, I do believe that there is a lot of stigma when it comes to mental illness and mental health. The film takes place in Spain, like I said, in the 1970s. So there was definitely a strong stigma during that time period. Um, and so that is my critique of the film. I think the film is fantastic. I think the film really highlights how far